Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube channel. This time, we're bringing you Dynasty Stashes. But before we start, I want to remind you to subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to help the channel grow. With that said, let's jump into the first stash. Deuce Vaughn. So it's important to note that running back stashes are different from wide receiver stashes. If you're stashing a wide receiver, they have to have done something if they're not a rookie. If they're a veteran, they have to have done something. But running back opportunity, we know, is mostly given instead of earned. And the Cowboys coaching staff just didn't decide to use Deuce Vaughn in 2023. Now, that's not to excuse his performance. He was bad. He had 23 carries for 40 yards and 7 catches for another 40 yards. Nothing good there. He did absolutely nothing and was only active in 7 games. But the Cowboys moved on from longtime starter Pollard, who signed with the Titans. After a lengthy delay, they re-signed Rico Dowdle, who did nothing in the first 3 years of his career, and only signed him to a deal with $200,000 in guarantees worth up to a maximum of $1.255 million. So he's not even a lock to make the roster at that contract. Of course, the Cowboys will likely add a running back in the NFL draft, likely with a 56th overall pick. They've been linked to both Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson, but they spent a pick on Vaughn last year. Dowdle's contract shows he's not even a lock to be the backup, let alone be the starter. So, in fact, Dowdle himself is good evidence that someone like Vaughn could succeed. Dowdle had in his first 3 years of his career 7 total carries. And then last year, he emerged to be the backup out of nowhere. Tony Pollard didn't get hurt. So we never saw what Rico Dowdle would have done as the starter, might have done as the starter. Maybe Vaughn is the backup this year. Maybe there is an injury. Who knows? He could do something in 2024. And it's important to note that he showed in college, despite his small size, that he had 3-down ability at Kansas State. 2021, 235 carries, 1,404 yards, and 18 touchdowns with 49 catches, 468 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Then 293 carries in 2022, 1,558 yards and 9 touchdowns, 42 catches, 378 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He was a 3-down player. So currently in DLF ADP, Vaughn is running back 83. I think he's worth the flyer. Look, you'll know almost immediately. He'll either make the 53-man roster or he won't. It's very simple. So if he does and he gets on the field at all, you'll have an opportunity to flip him for a 3rd-round pick. Maybe you would do that. But he's free right now. And running backs are the players you usually want to stash at the back end of your roster. Now, with that said, I do want to note a wide receiver, Demarcus Robinson, whose deal with the Rams, since it happened before free agency, went under the radar. 1 year, $4 million, with a $1.5 million signing bonus, up to $5 million with incentives. Now, that's a pretty large contract for a player who's not going to have a role. You usually don't give someone $1.5 million guaranteed just to sign and the whole contract guaranteed if this player is just not going to have a role at all. So the Rams usually play 11 personnel, and Robinson excelled as their wide receiver 3 last year behind Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Over 4 weeks, he played a legit starting role, 85% of snaps or more, or something like that. And over those 4 weeks, he had 17 catches on 29 targets for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns, averaged 4.3 catches and 66 yards per game. Now, the Rams this year finally have a normal complement of draft picks, so they could easily add a receiver in the first 3 rounds. But we know Cooper Kupp is not a paragon of health. We know that Robinson is a good stash who was fantasy viable. The last time we saw him on the field, it wasn't the beginning of 2023. It was at the end. So it was the last time we saw him. And right now, he's going at DLF ADP wide receiver 110, essentially undrafted, worthless. So, you never know. You're going to need these spot starters to get through the year. Now, this is not a value stash. You're not going to be able to flip Demarcus Robinson for anything. But you need spot starters. There are injuries. You need depth. This is the type of player where I see a path to being a lot better than wide receiver 110. So, definitely someone I would put on the end of my bench. Shouldn't be on any Dynasty waiver wires. And our last stash for the day, Mason Rudolph. He actually got a decent deal to sign with the Titans. 1 year, $2.87 million, basically all of it's guaranteed. And in 2023, he was solid in his limited action, despite playing on the really broken Steelers offense under Matt Canada and then under changing offensive coordinators, quarterbacks coming in and out, a whole lot of messes going on there. But despite all of that, he managed to have 74.3% completion, 3 touchdowns and no interceptions, and average 9.7 yards per attempt. I know it was a limited sample size, but he did succeed in those limited opportunities. Now, he joins a loaded Titans team. They have DeAndre Hopkins. They picked up his bonus, so he'll be there. They signed Calvin Ridley. They have Treylon Burks, who flashed some talent as a rookie, as their wide receiver 3. Chig Okonkwo they have, too. And the backfield combination of Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard. And that's assuming they don't add anybody in the NFL draft, which they still could. Definitely in the second round, they could add either tight end or wide receiver. So Will Levis missed a couple of games in 2023, and it's not like he was the best ever when he did play. So if Mason Rudolph goes in, he could have fantasy value. So just like he did in 2023. In Dynasty Superflex leagues, backup quarterbacks with known fantasy value are the best players to stash. Currently, DLF ADP, quarterback 41. He wasn't really drafted in most of the startups. So yeah, I would absolutely put Mason Rudolph on the back of my bench. And you can either just ride out the starts if you need a spot starter, or you can maybe flip him for a third if someone else needs a quarterback. Because as we know, 60 plus quarterbacks start every year. They will be necessary for other managers or yourself. Now, let's jump into, we're going to cover some of the free agency news. Part 2 of today's show, free agency news. So let's just jump right into that. Mike Williams signed with the Jets. 1 year, up to $15 million. It's an incentive-laden, prove-it deal. In 2023, he was oddly productive in the 3 games he played. He averaged 6.3 catches and 83 yards per game. It's actually the best average of his career. But in both 2021 and 2022, he was productive, if inconsistent. In 2021, he had 76 catches, 1,146 yards, and 9 touchdowns in 16 games. And then in 2022, 63 catches, 895 yards, and 4 touchdowns in 13 games. However, we know that he turns 30 in October and is coming off a bad ACL injury. I like this landing spot with Aaron Rodgers, but he has no path to be the wide receiver 1 here. That's Garrett Wilson. And I still expect the Jets to add somewhere to the receiving room. I've heard a lot of links to them. Brock Bowers at 10. And I think Bowers will be ahead of Mike Williams in the target pecking order pretty quickly. So while I like the contract, it didn't do much for me in Williams' dynasty value. I moved him up 1 spot. And in terms of trading Mike Williams away, I would smash any second I got for him, even an early 24 third in most formats. This is only a trade away player. Mike Williams is not a player I have any interest in acquiring. And I don't really think he has much impact on Garrett Wilson. If somehow in someone's mind this gives a buy window on Garrett Wilson, I would do that. Mike Williams is the least scary wide receiver 2 they could have added compared to guys like Mike Evans, Deontay Johnson, and Calvin Ridley. Next up, D'Onta Foreman signs with the Browns. It's 1 year. We still don't have the amount, which is usually a bad sign. That usually doesn't mean it's much. The contract probably slams the door shut on Kareem Hunt coming back. I don't think they're going to retain Kareem Hunt. But Foreman was not good in 2023. He had 109 carries, 425 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3.9 yards a carry, just 11 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown. But the main problem was not the stats. It's that he was benched and scratched behind Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson at many times. Neither of them are anything special. He turns 28 years old in April, so I'm not exactly optimistic about Foreman. And for some reason, the Browns also signed Nyheim Hines to a 1-year deal worth up to $3.5 million. Don't really know why he's there. The big elephant in the room is Nick Chubb's contract. Chubb is on the final year of his deal. The Browns could save almost $12 million in cap room by cutting him. Chubb is a fan favorite for the Browns. We know that, but it would be malpractice not to address this contract situation. I think that Chubb takes a pay cut to stay. I think part of the reason is that they signed Foreman to give them leverage to force Chubb to take probably a pay cut of a lot of that $12 million. The Browns also have Jerome Ford. Doesn't seem like they really trust him, though. He had 204 carries for 813 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 yards carry, 44 catches for 309 yards, 5 touchdowns. That 5 touchdowns and 44 catches is not going to happen again. He was adequate. He was serviceable, but I don't think that Jerome Ford is a workhorse back. I think he's more of a change of pace guy. And, I still expect these to be the 3 running backs, Foreman, Ford, and Chubb, going into 2024. Now, for now, I moved Foreman up 10 spots in my dynasty rankings just because I honestly thought he was done. So he got a job. So he moved up a little bit. And then I didn't move Jerome Ford, and I did not move Nick Chubb. Things will change a lot if Chubb is released. Believe me, Ford and Foreman will move up a little bit because the Browns are very short on draft capital. They have just 5 picks in total. They don't have a first and they don't have a 4th rounder. So just the 2nd and 3rd rounder of premium picks. There is no way either of those 2 are going to be a running back. They have so many needs. So I do not see them spending one of their only day 1 and day 2 picks, just 2 of them, on a running back. So yeah, I think these are the players that are competing for spots, and we'll see what happens. I do still think they work things out with Nick Chubb. Even if he's not going to be ready for week 1, I think they really, really want to keep him on their team if that's at all possible. But we'll have to see how that situation plays out. Now, I want to thank everyone for watching the video so far. If you're still here, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Likes and comments really help promote this video. Subscribing, we're 4 away from 2,600. That's the best way to support the channel. And of course, sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/fantasyadvice. And those patrons can ask advanced questions for the YouTube. I have 2 of them here, and we're going to answer the patron questions, and then we'll get out of here. So first question, I thought this was very topical considering Justin Herbert was on the last cover of the last video. Should we panic about the Justin Herbert situation? Absolutely do not panic. Herbert is an elite quarterback. I discussed that on the last episode with trades involving him, dynasty trades, how I still think Herbert is elite. Jim Harbaugh has never, ever in his career had a quarterback like Herbert or anyone even close. Yeah, the current weapons suck. Just Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer at wide receiver and nothing else is the worst wide receiver room in the NFL. But I bet the Chargers take a wide receiver at 5. Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. I would love if it were Marvin Harrison Jr. somehow. Do not sell Herbert low. I think this is a buying opportunity. They can't go into the season with just Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer at wide receiver. That is not going to happen. They are going to add someone else. They have to. So buy low, take advantage of it. I've seen crazy deals for Herbert, mid first in a super flex, a couple of late first and a 25 first, something like that. I am looking to buy Justin Herbert. Last question. Any projections on wide receivers, running backs outside the wide receiver and running back 3 range that we could see pop off? I will say, in Dynasty, it's hard to pop off out of that range. And usually it's running backs who jump way up from low down rather than wide receivers. With running backs, it's usually relative unknowns or players who haven't had much of a shot over known mediocre players. So some of the guys I would put in that group include Kendre Miller, kind of sat out most of last year, didn't play much. Chase Brown, similar, didn't really get much of a chance, but looked pretty good on the opportunities he had. Jaleel McLaughlin, ditto, looked out good on the opportunities he had, didn't have enough opportunities. Wide receivers typically don't break out of that range unless they did a lot as rookies. It's usually someone who didn't get the playing time, but did well on the playing time they had. So the one that I would point out is Dontavion Wicks. He has great per route numbers, look great on tape, but has low value because he's blocked by other players and never earned the playing time that we need him to have. But if the coaching staff changes its mind and makes Wicks a starter, I think he could be incredibly valuable and move up the ranks to at least be, the wide receiver 2 on the Packers behind Jaden Reed. But that doesn't mean I would spend a lot on him because the odds are against him given how much playing time he did and honestly did not get last year. Now, if you like the video, once again, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to support the YouTube. If you want to ask questions in advance, the patreon.com/fantasyadvice, best way to ask questions you can discuss in the Patreon Discord and all of that. Additionally, don't forget to check out the Buy Me a Coffee link. If you just want to ask a one-off question, no strings, I'll give you a detailed answer. If you donate up to anything more than $3, I'll give you a detailed Dynasty response or whatever question you want. It can be a personal question. I'll answer any questions on there. But that link is also in the description of the video. But lastly, I just want to thank everyone for watching, for making the YouTube channel as successful as it's been. It's all because of you guys. And I'll see you all later. Peace out.